You see it the moment the sun is finally right, the ground finally dry, the window you waited all spring for finally open. You climb up, turn the key, and the screen lights up with a code. Not a fix, a message. Call your dealer. And that tractor you paid for, in full, with your own money, just became a $200,000 paperweight sitting in the middle of your field. I know that screen. I have stared at it. And here's what I learned the hard way. The machine was never really yours. You bought the steel. They kept the keys. But there is a way out, and farmers are already walking through it, trading green paint for iron they can actually fix themselves. I am going to show you a lawsuit the federal government filed on January 15, 2025, and a signed agreement from January 8, 2023, that most owners never read. By the end, you will know exactly how to break the lock on a machine you already own, sitting in your shed right now. This is not for people shopping. This is for the man who already got trapped. Let me take you back to the day it happened to me. It was a Tuesday in late June, and I had roughly 40 acres of hay down and rain in the forecast for Thursday. My baler and my tractor were both fine mechanically. Not a bearing gone, not a belt slip, not a drop of oil low, but a sensor threw a fault, and the control unit did what it was designed to do. It derated the engine to a crawl and put a lock on the whole system until an authorized technician cleared it. I called the dealer at 7 in the morning. They told me the earliest a tech could come out was the following Monday. 6 days. I offered to bring the part in myself. I offered to pay double. Did not matter. Because the code that cleared that fault lived on a laptop only their people were allowed to plug in. That hay rotted. I watched the sky open up on Thursday afternoon, and I stood in my kitchen window and did the math on what that field cost me. It was not the repair. The repair was nothing. It was the permission I did not have to fix my own machine. And that is the trick. Right there. They do not stop you with a bad part. They stop you with a password. Now here is the thing that made me start digging. For most of my life, a tractor was the most honest machine on the farm. You could hear what was wrong. You could feel it. My father ran the same 2 tractors for 30 years, and when something broke, he fixed it in the shop with a wrench and a manual, and maybe a call to the neighbor who was better at hydraulics than he was. Nobody asked permission. Nobody needed a code. The iron did what you told it to do. But somewhere in the last 20 years, the machine's got a second engine, a software engine, and that one does not answer to you. It answers to the company that built it. They started putting electronic control units on everything, and they wrapped those controllers in code that the law calls a technological protection measure. In plain English, a lock. And they made it so that the parts inside your tractor have to be recognized and blessed by their software before the machine will run. Swap in a genuine part yourself, and the tractor might still refuse to move until a technician charges you to authorize it. That is not a repair. That is a toll booth, and they built one at every gate on the machine you own. I want you to understand how deep this goes, because it is worse than a single bad morning. There is a report I found from a public research group, the U.S. Public Interest Research Group, and they put out a study they called Deer in the Headlights. They laid out how the manufacturer keeps the diagnostic software, the payload files, and the documentation locked away from ordinary owners and independent shops. And when you cannot diagnose, you cannot decide. You are blind. You have to tow it in or wait for the truck. And every hour that machine sits is money bleeding out of your operation during the exact days of the year when hours are worth the most. Now here is the part that made my stomach turn. It is not an accident. It is a business model. Think about what a dealer makes when you buy the tractor. A one-time sale, but think about what they make when they own every repair for the next 20 years. Every fault, every software update, every part that needs to be authorized. That is not a sale. That is a subscription you never agreed to on a machine you already paid off. The financial analysts figured this out before we did. They call parts and service the high-margin business. Some estimates put the profit margin on service and parts far above the margin on the whole tractor itself. So the company has every reason on earth to make sure that work can only happen in one place, their place. And once I saw it that way, I could not unsee it. Every lock controller was not protecting me from myself, it was protecting their revenue from me. But knowing you are trapped is not the same as getting out. So I started asking a harder question. If the machine is this locked, who was supposed to stop them, and why didn't they? That question led me straight into a courtroom. Because farmers did not just complain, they sued. In 2022, a group of growers took the manufacturer to federal court, and the cases got pulled together into one big consolidated action in the Northern District of Illinois. The judges bundled it under a single multi-district litigation, and the heart of it was an antitrust claim. The argument was simple, and it was exactly what I lived. The company had, the farmers said, illegally cornered the market for repair of its own machines by withholding the software tools and information that anybody else would need to do the work. They tied the machine to the dealer on purpose, and the farmers paid for it in downtime and inflated bills, and the money in those filings was not small. The complaints described a repair market worth billions of dollars a year, and they argued farmers were paying far more than they would in a free and open market. When you are the only shop allowed to touch the machine, you set the price, and the customer has no answer except to pay it or park it. I read those filings at my kitchen table more than once, and what got me was not the legal language. It was that every single farmer in there had my Tuesday in June. Different crop, different state, same screen, same code. Same helpless feeling of standing next to a machine you own and not being allowed to save your own season. So the lawsuits gave me hope. Somebody with lawyers was finally naming the thing out loud, but then I found the piece of paper that nearly killed that hope, and it changed how I saw the whole fight. On January 8, 2023, the manufacturer signed a memorandum of understanding with the American Farm Bureau Federation. And when I first heard about it, I thought, finally somebody negotiated us a win. The headlines made it sound like right to repair had arrived. The company promised to give farmers and independent shops access to the tools, the manuals, the diagnostics, but then I read what the thing actually said. And here is the trap inside the trap. That memorandum was not a law. It was a handshake. It was voluntary. And buried in it was language where, in exchange, the Farm Bureau agreed to encourage state affiliates to refrain from pushing right to repair legislation. Read that again slowly. The document that was sold as farmers winning the right to repair contained a promise to back off the actual laws that would force it. It even carried a line saying it did not require the company to divulge any trade secrets or let owners override safety features or emissions controls, and those categories are wide enough to drive a combine through. So the loudest farm organization in the country signed a paper that gave the company a public relations trophy and gave us almost nothing we could enforce. There was no penalty if they dragged their feet. There was no independent referee. It was a promise from the same people who built the toll booths to please stop trying to pass a law that would tear them down. That is the moment I stopped believing anyone was going to hand me my freedom. I realized the only way out was the one I built myself. Now, before I show you how, I need to tell you why the machines got locked in the first place, because it is not just software greed, it is emissions. Somewhere around the 2011 model years and after, the diesel engines on these machines got wrapped in complex emission systems. Exhaust fluid, particulate filters, regeneration cycles, sensors, watching sensors. And the company used those emission systems as the perfect excuse. They could say, we cannot let you into the controller because you might tamper with the emissions equipment, and that is federally regulated. It is the ultimate skeleton key for them. Any lock, any fault, any refusal to let you in, and they can wave the emissions flag and the conversation is over. But here is what that did to the value of an entire generation of iron. It split the market clean in two, because a whole lot of us looked at those lockdown, sensor-choked, dealer-dependent machines, and we did something the company never expected. We went backward. We started hunting for the tractors built before the software swallowed them, the mechanical diesels, the pre-emissions workhorses, and the used market noticed. Prices on clean, simple, older tractors, the kind you can fix with a manual and a socket set, started climbing while the locked machines depreciated like stones. That is the market screaming a truth the company will not admit. Owners will pay a premium for a machine they are actually allowed to own. And that same instinct is exactly what is driving the second escape route, the one in the title. because it is not only old iron that gives you your independence back, it is a whole class of tractors coming out of Europe that were built on a different idea of who the machine belongs to. So let me walk you into that, because this is where the exit gets wide enough to drive through. Now do all three of those and something changes in your chest. Picture yourself standing next to that locked machine in your shed, laptop in one hand, a fault code on the screen, and for the first time you are the one deciding what happens next instead of the dealer's calendar. That is exactly what the complete iron furrow system was built to hand you, in full and for good. The first volume, Fixed or Owned, exposes what your EULA actually lets Deere control and lays out 5 cash recovery vehicles ranked by real ROI and honest effort, so you recover cash in year 1 instead of bleeding it. The second, Break the Lock, walks you through a 12-month roadmap in the right order of operations toward year 2 control with 0 dealer dependency, plus 5 concrete alternatives with documented ROI. And the exclusive third volume covers machine-independent operation. Every volume is a standalone action plan, and the bundle is the complete field manual delivered as an instant download you can read tonight. Speaking of tonight, here is your free check before you buy anything. Pull up the Memorandum of Understanding from January 8, 2023, and read the part where the Farm Bureau agreed to discourage right to repair legislation. It is public. Verify with your own eyes that the handshake sold as your win quietly promised to back off the very laws that would free you. The fastest way to get the books is to scan the QR code right there on your screen, or go to the link in the description or the pinned comment. And this matters now for a simple reason, not a fake deadline. Every day that lock machine sits, that dealer subscription you never signed keeps costing you, and the sooner you break it, the more you keep. So get your own map before the next fault code hits. But I promised you the way all the way out. When my green machine had me over a barrel that June, I started doing something I had never done in my life. I started looking at other paint. And what I found in the European and independent brands surprised me. I am talking about the tractors coming from makers like Fendt out of Germany, Deutz-Fahr, the Italian lines like Landini and McCormick and Same, the Finnish Valtra, the Czech Zetter, and yes, the Japanese Kubota that has quietly taken over more American farmyards than most people realize. Now, I am not going to sit here and tell you every one of those is a magic key with no electronics. Modern emissions rules touch everybody who sells here, and some of these makers lock things down too. But the culture is different, and the culture is what matters. A lot of these builders came up serving small and mid-sized independent farmers in countries where the local mechanic is king, and the nearest factory dealer might be a country away. That reality forced them to keep serviceability in the design, simpler layouts, wider parts availability, a tradition of letting the local shop actually work on the thing. And here is the number that got my attention. When I priced comparable horsepower, some of these European and independent machines came in noticeably cheaper up front, and the parts and independent service around them meant my long-term ownership cost projection dropped hard. I ran the math on a mid-size utility tractor, and between a lower purchase price and the freedom to use an independent mechanic, I was looking at thousands of dollars a year. I would stop handing to a dealer service department. Over the life of the machine, that was not a rounding error. That was a down payment on the next tractor. But the upfront price and the paint color are not really the point. Independence is the point. And I know what a lot of you are thinking right now, because I thought it too. That is fine for the next tractor. But what about the one I already have? What about the locked machine sitting in my shed today that I cannot afford to replace? I hear you. And this next part is built for you specifically, the owner who already feels the door slam shut. So stay with me, because this is the part nobody tells you. You are not as trapped as they want you to feel. Here is the first thing you can actually do this week. The diagnostic software they told you was for dealers only is not as far out of reach as you think. The manufacturer sells a version of its own diagnostic and service tool to the public. It has been viable for years. Very few owners know it, because nobody at the dealership is going to hand you a brochure for the thing that lets you stop needing them. You can purchase the customer service diagnostic application, and you can get the connection hardware, the electronic data link adapter that plugs your laptop into the machine. With that set up, you can read the fault codes yourself. You can see what the machine is actually complaining about instead of guessing. You can clear certain faults. You can calibrate. You can stop being blind. Now, is it the full dealer level suite that does absolutely everything? No, and I will be straight with you about that, because the company deliberately keeps the deepest functions, the ones that authorize new parts, behind the higher wall. But knowing exactly what is wrong changes the whole negotiation. When you drive in already knowing it is one sensor and you have the code and the part number, you take away their power to invent a bigger problem. I have watched a four-figure repair estimate shrink the moment the tech realized I already knew what the machine was telling me. The second thing you can do is find and connect with the independent repair network that has been quietly building around this fight. There are independent technicians, and there are online communities of owners who share the tools, the files, and the know-how. Some of the most powerful of those tools came from an unexpected place. Do you remember the news that during the war, when equipment got hauled off out of Ukraine, the company was able to reach out across the network and remotely disable those stolen machines? That story cut both ways, because it proved to every farmer watching that the company can reach into your tractor anytime it wants. But it also lit a fire under the people who crack these systems. At a major security conference in 2022, a researcher who goes by Sick Codes stood up and demonstrated that he had jailbroken the machine's display, got right past the manufacturer's locks, and to prove the point, he ran a video game on the tractor screen. That was not a stunt, that was a message. The lock is not the wall of God, it is just a lock, and locks can be opened. The third thing, and this one costs you nothing but a little time, is to write down and save your own repair history in a form the machine cannot hold hostage. Photograph your part numbers. Keep your own log of every fault code and what fixed it. Build your own manual for your own machine. Because the day you decide to sell, or the day you finally switch paint, the buyer who trusts a documented machine pays more, and you have quietly built the record the company wanted to keep locked inside a controller you could not read. And to give it to you, I have to tell you about the two things that finally cracked this wide open, because they turn all of this from a private struggle into a legal right you can stand on. Here is the buried treasure. Everybody heard about that toothless memorandum from the Farm Bureau. Almost nobody heard about what a single state did just 3.5 months later. On April 25, 2023, the governor of Colorado signed House Bill 23-1011, the Consumer Right to Repair Agricultural Equipment Act. It was the first law of its kind in the entire nation. And unlike that handshake memorandum, this one has teeth. It took effect on January 1st, 2024, and it does what the voluntary promise refused to do. It legally requires the manufacturer to provide owners and independent repair shops with the parts, the software, the tools, the documentation, and yes, the diagnostic capability needed to fix agricultural equipment. And it treats a failure to comply as a deceptive trade practice, which means it comes with real enforcement behind it, not a polite request. Now, you might be sitting in Iowa or Georgia or Texas and thinking, that is Colorado, that does me no good. But here is why it matters to every one of you, no matter your state. Once a manufacturer is forced to build the tools, the documentation, and the access portal to satisfy the law in one state, that infrastructure exists. It does not unexist at the state line, and it becomes the model that other state houses copy word for word. That single Colorado bill is the crack in the dam, and the water is already pushing through. And then came the hammer, because here is the finale, the thing that tells you this is not just a few angry farmers anymore. On January 15, 2025, the Federal Trade Commission, joined by the Attorneys General of Illinois and Minnesota, filed a lawsuit directly against the manufacturer in federal court. The government itself. The complaint accuses the company of running an illegal repair monopoly, of forcing farmers into dealer service by withholding a fully functional version of its diagnostic software from equipment owners and independent shops, and of driving up repair costs and downtime for farmers across the country. The government put in writing what you and I have been living for a decade. That the lock was never about safety or emissions or protecting you. It was about money and it was about control. So put the whole picture together now the way I finally did. There is a class action antitrust fight already consolidated in federal court. There is a real law on the books in Colorado with real penalties that forces the tools into your hands and is spreading to other states. There is the federal government itself standing in a courtroom calling the whole scheme an illegal monopoly. And there is the diagnostic tool you can already buy, the independent network you can already join, and a whole world of European and independent iron built by companies that never treated the local mechanic as the enemy. The way out was there the whole time. It was buried under a fake agreement and a wall of emissions excuses and a dealership that would never volunteer the map. A handful of stubborn farmers, a couple of hackers, one brave state house, and finally the federal government kept the path open. And now you can walk it. You do not have to rot a field of hay in your kitchen window like I did. You can read your own codes this week. You can lean on a law that now says the tools belong in your hands. And when it comes time for the next machine, you can look hard at the iron coming out of Germany and Italy and Finland and Japan, and you can choose a tractor that was built to be owned instead of rented. Here is what I want you to feel walking away from this. That freedom you thought you lost, the plain right to fix the thing you paid for, was never actually gone. It was just hidden behind a password and a paint color, and now you know where the door is. You are not a customer who waits for permission. You are the kind of owner who bought the iron to outlive you, and you refuse to rent back what you already own. That is who we are. So let me ask you straight, and I want you to actually answer this one. What was the single worst repair invoice or lockout you ever got handed? The one that made you feel like a renter on your own farm? Tell me the machine, the code, the dollar amount, and what state you are standing in. Drop it in the comments right now, because when 1,000 of us list them out in one place, that list becomes evidence, and evidence is the thing they cannot lock. If you are done being told you cannot fix what you own, come stand with the rest of us taking our iron back. In the next one, I am pulling the invoices apart line by line and showing you exactly which so-called mandatory dealer repairs you can legally and safely do yourself and how much each one really should have cost. Do not miss it. That field in June cost me a season. This channel is how I make sure it never costs you one. I know that screen. I have stared at it too. This video gave you the overview, but there is more. Come inside my membership, The Right to Repair, where I pick up exactly where I just stopped. In there, you can ask me your own question, and I answer myself, a real person, not a machine. You are not alone. Farmers like you are already inside. Just point your phone's camera at the code on the screen. Cancel anytime, one click. Now, if this surprised you, wait until you hear why so many American farmers are turning their backs on John Deere balers. The reasons might change how you see your own equipment. That one's starting right here.